All right, so these are the two videos I'm going to go off of. We got this one from the side and this one from an angled on the back. I don't have that much to go off of, so this will be a little bit less detailed than the one I did for Matt. I got to ask him a bunch of questions before I did his video. I'm basically just going off of these two videos and a couple things that Matt mentioned to me. So my information on you isn't as vast, so I can't pick it apart as much. What we'll get out of this is the questions I would ask you based off of how you're moving in this video. And then once you would answer those questions, I could then critique it more and pick out what needs to be fixed. So let's go from the side first. Slow. The one thing with Matt is I knew he had an injury or yeah, basically an injury, and it was nerve related. So I was looking for something that would cause that. All right, with you, there's nothing that I'm specifically looking for, but there are some points that stand out to me in terms of efficient movement. So the one thing that I notice is how quickly your front foot right here goes to external rotation. Pretty much your foot turns out, you're duck footed, or your foot turns in, pigeon toed, I guess you call it. All right, your foot wants to externally rotate right here. Okay, and that's really early. And when you go to land, you're just above the ground. Now you hit and you floated above the ground. Now you hit and your foot is externally rotated. So if the catcher was here, your foot will be pointing there. So what I think going off of this is that you are external rotation dominant in the hips, which would then tell me that you need to fix your back leg in a way. I would test we would actually measure your hips. All right. The test is basically you lay on your stomach and you let your knees or your feet fall out. You measure that angle and then you go the opposite way. That's how I found out Matt was extremely internally rotational dominant. It means that your knees like to be inside your feet, or your knees like to be outside of your feet. That's basically all it means. So if you are externally rotational dominant in the hips, that would mean that these two things in your back leg will be bad. All right. And I mean, I could measure it and you could be the exact same as Matt, where you like your knees inside your feet, and then this back leg would be right, but your front leg would be wrong. So we have to figure out how you are basically built and how you are supposed to move, and then we can keep going forward from there. But these are just the questions that we need to ask to figure out how you move and everything. So one thing that Matt and I talked about, because he is internal dominant, is this knee lift. Your knee lift is better for internal than it is for an external guy. And I think as of now that you are external, just to clear that up. I think you are external. So I'm going to go off of that. This crease right here in your hip is putting you into internal, okay? Your foot back here is externally rotated to the rubber. Basically, your knee and your leg is cocked in a bunch of different weird positions. You're not exactly sure what you're trying to get into, all right? So as you bring, I'll draw a line here to make it clear. It's a shitty line. No. All right. Your center of mass is pretty much what you always go off of. Ear through belly button, through ground. All right, so as you pick this knee up, you're coming back across that line and staying there for a while, okay? And again, not bad if you're internal. It'll cause problem if you're external. The reason that I think your front foot, see, even your front foot turns, see, it's turned in, your hips are turned in, your back leg's turned in, and then watch your front foot, your toes right here, they start to kick open, and then it starts to kick open even more and more and more and more. All right. So as soon as you come out of leg lift, your foot wants to go to external rotation. So again, that's why I think you're externally rotational dominant. And again, going off of that, what we want to see is this. Let's go back. We want to see, and Matt said that you guys have talked about this. He just didn't know that it was possible for it not to be good for him. We want your knee to stay on the top of that blue line, okay? And you see how far it moves. And that's because you're carrying this crease in your hip, and that knee is slightly in. And what I think that knee lift coming back and closing you off, and then you coming out of it, you're basically like a swinging gate. You have no linear move down the mound. And that's what causes this knee to run away from this line, even though you're trying to keep it back here, because Matt said you guys talked about that and focus on that. Even though you are trying to do something, you are doing things that don't allow you to accomplish that. And no one ever told you, so it's not your fault. But if you were to keep a straighter leg lift, all right, and let's go back to that center line. Here, belly button. Okay. If we go to this, and at this point, your knee was, it shouldn't be past this line, maybe here, but probably ideally out here. Okay, so you're going to keep your knees apart as you lift your leg as well. And that is going to, as you then start to go down the mound, and I haven't even looked if you have a hinge. Yeah, see, so you start to take your pelvis, your hips, your center of mass, you lead with your butt. That's what people are talking about, but they don't tell you how. Right, let me clear this. Right, where's the frame? Right there. All right, so I need a line here and a line here. So I'm basically trying to mark the center of your pelvis, all right, just below your belly button. And now as we go forward, all right, you try to, and you actually do a good job of it. So I'm going from this point to roughly this point, all right? And in a hinge, you want to go down and forward, all right? So you actually do have a good hinge, but the way you accomplish it is not ideal, all right? Again, this knee should be back here, I think. We have to measure to find out for sure. And there's guys that are neutral that they might not stay back here, but they might be in here. But the fact that you've left so hard, the only people that can do that are guys like Matt, where they're really internally rotational dominant. Going off your front foot, I don't think that's your case. I think just your leg lift and your leg lift and the way you're setting up your back leg, you were never taught how it can be bad for you. So once that would be the first thing that you look at, and like I said, we measure the hip mobility, and then when we transfer it here, we try it. Hey, does this feel right? Does it feel good? Video it. Hey, this checks out better. And then obviously you can use a radar gun to say, hey, is there any immediate improvement just from the simple mechanical change, whether it's a cueing thing or you physically just do something different. That would be those would be the first things I ask you about and test and measure and try to figure out, because you're not bad, you're just out of time, and timing starts as soon as you pick up your leg. So if those things are happening as soon as you pick up your leg, there's no reason for me to critique anything down here, because I know it's going to be out of time. All right, I'll point out some things I'm looking at here that tell me you're off time, but I wouldn't ever like say, hey, you gotta get more scap load or anything, or you gotta use your front arm differently, or you gotta land with a more straight front leg or anything. Though this position is a product of all of the stuff you do here. If this is wrong, that's definitely going to be out of sync. So if we were to break this down and take pictures of it, this is a pretty good position, not gonna lie. So we always look for the arm to be at 90 here. If it is, so 90, we're good. Inside is still good. And here you're like a catcher. Matt said you used to be a catcher. This doesn't allow the arm to rotate as fast, but it's safer on the shoulder joint and quicker. And then as soon as we start to leak out here, we're putting a ton of stress on the elbow. All right, and that's as it gets up and starts to lay back. So if my arm's like this and starts to lay back, this is heavier than if it does this and this. So going off of that position, but hey, you're pretty good mechanically. There shouldn't be anything wrong, right? But if you look at how you get to each position and the transition between the two, that's where you can see the issues, all right? And another reason why I think you're externally dominant in the hips is this pattern right here. All right, again, everything stems from the beginning, but watch your, I'll put a mark on it. Your hip here, and again, I'm going off of your arm. As soon as my arm gets to 90 and flipped up, we are then starting the rotational transfer in from the lower body into the upper body. So watch the mark on your hip. Okay, that comes through, and then it stops. All right, you can see it's blurry. It's blurry still a little bit, and then okay, it's clear. All right, the frames of the camera tell me that you're accelerating, slowing down, stopped. All right, we want, basically you're a frame again, it depends on what you're looking at. You are a frame behind in the hips, and you are a frame ahead in the arm. So basically you're a frame off. Maybe two if you want to add them together. But anyway, if your hips were here, so a green circle here, while the ball and arm were here, that would be a properly sequenced landing position. Okay. So if we go because then this would happen. This next frame would be the last instance of your hip rotation and your hip acceleration. So as soon as your hips start to decelerate, your shoulders are going to accelerate. All right. And with your arm in this position and your shoulders starting to accelerate, that's going to lay the arm back at the proper time. And it's going to give you the most amount of time to accelerate the forearm and hand and ball. All right. So your acceleration happens a frame late while your arm is here. All right. Your shoulders already started to rotate and then your arm started to accelerate. So you're just you're losing. If we go to the backside video, let me clear these drawings. So stay middle. So your arm is, if we're looking right here, this is the position your arm's going to be in when it starts to accelerate. Okay. We want to be ideally here when it starts to accelerate, but you can see the ball is still flipping up as you do that. All right. So again, you're a frame late on the hips and arm action working together. So we keep going. You can see the hips stabilize here. And then now you're going to go into extension. Okay. I call it thoracic extension. Basically your chest puffs out, your hips, your butt sticks back, and then the arm lays back here like this. It just gives the scap more room to lay down. And then the arm accelerates here like you're doing. And then it comes out. But you can see just how, like when I watch this in full time, it doesn't look like there's much violence in your throw. It kind of looks like you're sub-max and not violent. You're not, I guess y'all call it intent. There's not a high intent. That might be, you might just be throwing a low intent bullpen, or that might be how you throw. Again, questions I have to ask you personally. So if we go, if I'm running them on these, they're choppy if I run at full speed. So let's go back even further. So what happens right here is the hips are completely done and they are just a foundation for the upper half to accelerate. And we would want your shoulder is, let's put blue. Blue is bad in this situation. Your shoulder's here when the hips are done. And it's possible to be, it's going to be between these two frames. Okay, so honestly, I think you're mobile enough. You look like a mobile person to get to this position where your shoulder is here versus this blue one, and your hips are done in this position. This could be a little tough. It's going to be more likely this position. All right, but I think in this position of the hips, I think you're mobile enough to keep your shoulder in that position, which then keeps the arm back here, allows it to drop under a more proper position, allowing it to rotate, the shoulders rotate faster and the arm to have more time to accelerate, which means more ball velocity and the harder you throw. You don't, there's people who say, do I have bad mechanics or anything like that? It's kind of how everything works together. Like you can do one thing bad, but then if things clean up down the road in the process of your delivery, then you can argue, yes, you have bad mechanics, or no, you don't, because the output, really all that matters is how you can you produce high velocities with good stuff and control. Too much is focused on just throwing hard. You got to put it where the hell you want it. I don't care if it's 95 or 100. If you throw it right down the middle, somebody's going to hit it eventually. And people hit 105 off of Chapman, 103. Like, it's, you have to put it where you want it. So it's not just about ripping and pulling and throwing hard. It's about efficiently accelerating your arm to then be able to take your fingers to the target under violence. So again, I think Matt said you've only been pitching a couple of years and you used to be a catcher. So I'm sure that you've been given information, and you try to implement it, but you don't fully know all the aspects of it. Okay, a lot of people teach the stuff that they don't research it and study it and try it, and they give you a couple things and then they leave you to be, oh, he's good or he's not. Well, he can be a lot better. Everybody can be a lot better if you do things correctly. So those are the big things that I would ask you, and those would be the first things you figure out. Again, just to reiterate, I think you're going to be externally rotationally dominant in the hips, and that will put you on time here more, and that'll just equate to higher ball velocity. I have one thing, once we would clean something up like that, I would do some movement stuff, screening, just to see how you move after I measured your hips and everything. I'd ask you a couple questions about your weight room stuff. Where are you the strongest? Squat, deadlift, lunge. Matt's really strong in the lats, and that's a big precursor to throwing hard, but he's never trained a lot of high intensity or 1 rep max on the legs. He's kind of out of balance between the legs, the lats, and the shoulder, the decelerator muscles. So me getting a little gauge off of that for you would help me as well. But again, first things first, how do you move, and what are we actually trying to accomplish while you're going down the mound? And then it took me about 2 to 3 weeks to get all of my questions to Matt. And I watched what he did. I questioned, then we did more, then you question again. And you're always just looking, trying to tweak, asking questions. And then as long as you are not getting worse, okay, and we check that a lot. I don't know if you see Matt do the hand grip thing. That's a really easy and quick way to test your nervous system. Are you fatigued and stuff? So just always tracking and measuring things to check whether you're getting worse. Like, you should be able to, you should have I sit this and I top this, and that should be pretty consistent. Heavy velocity fluctuations are often just mechanical inefficiencies because you can't repeat what you do every single time. One thing we saw with Matt when we put that sensor on his arm is his release point changed a bunch at the beginning, and now it's kind of solidified between 40 and 45. When he warms up, he's closer to 45, and as he starts to add some intensity, he drops around 40. And that works with the averages of a guy that's internally rotated, because they have to get really far out front when they throw, because they have to take out all the slack in the pelvis and before the energy transfers up the chain. Everybody needs to throw out front, but externally rotational dominant guys aren't as far out front. So that's why they have a lot of those guys pitch up in the zone and have whatchamacallit, riding fastballs or high spin rates. That's what I'm looking for. So, yep, just those things. If you want to come with Matt one time, or or text me or whatever. It's up to you. But those are the questions that's basically what you get from me. Whether you see me in person, call me or text me or whatever. So